This is where is he? My colleague Anton from Pitfalls. So our topic for today is the Web API of Xtext. This was introduced 1 year ago. So I think there was already a talk on last EclipseCon about that initial release. So it's a client-server-based architecture where the client is actually an editor that is embedded in some web page, and the server is implemented using a servlet that internally delegates to all the Xtext language infrastructure. So the idea is to make all the core, or also called runtime functionality of Xtext, and plus the IDE platform-independent components available in a web page. The new generator version of Xtext, so the language infrastructure generator that was also released last year, is able to generate some example code that you can use as a basis to get started and to see how it works, how you can use it, basically. And I will just show the most important steps to get there. So first, you would create a subclass of the Xtext servlet, and usually annotate that with the web servlet annotation, so you can specify in which context you want to make that available. And usually in the initialization method, you would set up your language infrastructure using the concept known from Xtext, where an injector for dependency injection is created and registered for the language file extension, or maybe also a content type. So and this is the basis under which the language services are then retrieved for any language. And you can, of course, do this also for multiple languages here. Then for testing, we often use the Jetty server, which is very lightweight and easy to start. So you can start it also from Eclipse, and you see here, you can test your server on localhost on a certain port. And then you just have to create an example page that can communicate with the server. And that is also very easy to get started. So basically, you first load the Xtext editor integration for the editor of your choice. I will come back to this in a minute. And using that, you just say create editor, and as required, you can pass some options. So what this does is that it creates a text editor widget enriched with the language-specific functionality that is backed by the server in a section of your page that is marked with this ID Xtext-editor. Here you can add additional options if you prefix attributes with data-editor. Here, for example, we can specify the language that we want to represent in that editor. This is maybe the easiest option. There's also another way how to add the language services on your client. If you already have an editor that is set up using the editor library's native creation methods, then you can use this function create services that will add the Xtext language-specific services to this existing editor, and you can even remove them later if you want. So that means you can have a text editor that serves one specific language for a certain time, and can, if you need, you can switch off the services and turn on services for another language, for example. So what you get then is something that can look at this. We will see a live demo quite soon. So you can put this editor widget anywhere in your web page, and you have all the things you need, like error markers and content assist. There are 3 widgets that we support out of the box. Of course, you could add more integrations yourself using the same protocol. But the ones that we have looked at are the Orion editor widget, then the ACE and CodeMirror widgets. Here it's important to understand this is not the Orion server and workspace. It's only the editor as a standalone component, just that can be used anywhere in a web page. And so here you see a list of features so language-specific features that we support in our integration. And here also it's important to understand that, so this list has nothing to do with what is possible with these frameworks or so. It's only what we have already can already support out of the box with our integration. So of course, for example, it is possible to implement hovers also for the other editors. It was only that Orion already contained this service, so it was very easy for us to add this support. And for the others, you would do some JavaScript code yourself in order to support that. And another thing here, of course, is if you use the Orion server, including its own workspace concept and so on, it could also be possible maybe to, or quite certainly be possible to add the Xtext services to that one. But that would be a bit out of scope of what we're talking about here. So here it's about embedding editors in some other kind of surroundings, websites, and not about having this IDE like the Orion server does or She does or so. But if you want, that would certainly also be possible. So as a very general comparison, I would say Ace and CodeMirror, they are both JavaScript libraries that are quite on the same level. So they use quite similar concepts and here and there, and quite easy to set up. Orion 2, I would say it's slightly more complex because it has a plugin layer in between also that is used in the context of the Orion server, where you can add JavaScript implementations as plugins that can enrich the functionality of Orion. So that can be very useful in some cases, but if you use it as a widget alone, sometimes it can complicate things a bit. But it still, of course, also works. So I will show the three editors in comparison, and this demo is available online, web-demo.typefox.io. So you can try it out yourself. It's a page that contains an editor for each of the three widget types for the same language, and it's always a very simple Xtext language for calculations, where you can define variables and functions and use predefined variables like the square root here. And on the left side, you have input values that you can feed the calculation with. On the right side, you see an output. So all this is also updated. Wait. Why doesn't the focus go here? Okay. So the output is refreshed and after a certain delay, and here I can change the numbers and the output is refreshed. So this also shows that it's quite easy to integrate this editor widget and the calculations behind it, and so the calculation is done on the server, so you can implement that in Java. It's very easy to integrate that with other elements of your website. So in this case, just input fields and some text here. Here you have the content assist, where you can reference the input fields, predefined functions, as well as locally defined values. And yeah, you have validation, you have highlighting of occurrences, like here if you select X, you see it's selected over there. If we have a look at the same thing in the Ace editor, you see the functionality is more or less the same. It has a slightly different look and feel. Slightly different coloring. Of course, a lot of that can be adjusted using the API of those editors, but still, it could be useful for you to use this web page also to evaluate the three editors and just try out. If you want, if you're considering to use this kind of integration, you can use this to kind of find out which editor fits most your expectations of the general look and feel. So let's get a little bit into the background about how the client and the server communicate. Here we have a representation of the client on the left side and the Xtext server that is on the back end. And all communication here is of course, since it's based on a servlet, is initiated from the client. So for example, if the user hits control space, that results in a request for completion proposals. The server applies this to the current cursor position in the text and computes a list of proposals that is put into the response. The same thing also for validation. So this has to be triggered by the client, so the client has to know when to re-trigger validation, and this is done by our integration always after a certain delay, after changes have applied. So I think default is half a second, then a validation request is sent, and the result is a list of errors and warnings, or maybe that could, of course, be empty. There are two different options for synchronizing the text, because, of course, the server has to have its own copy of the current text that is shown in the editor in order to be able to do the language-specific services. The first option is to send the whole text content of the editor. So the server will have to parse the input, compute the service for it, and then send the result. The good thing about this approach is the server does not have to hold any internal state for that client. So if that is an important property in your application, that is possible. So this would be the stateless variant. And then there's also stateful variant, where the client always sends only the delta, so incremental updates, like if the user types some text, only the new text is sent, which of course decreases the size of the messages, even especially if the text is a bit larger. That can be a big performance increase. And the server is also able to process only partial updates in that case. So we have a speed up on the server side too. Well, on the other side, the server has to hold some state. It has more memory consumption per user. So which option to take really has a lot to do of the use case, with the number of users you have, and so on. And now I will hand over to Anton, who will tell us about some experience with this API.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everybody. So since Mira built this API, we've gained some experience using it in real customer projects, and I would like to share it with you. So here is a list of requirements. The first of all, it's obviously features, and the customer for which we worked, he wanted to get as much as possible out of the box. The second feature was like, he wanted to support Internet Explorer 9 and higher versions. So it's actually quite typical use case for big companies with established infrastructure. They wanted to support partial editors. You could think about them like it's embedded editors in Eclipse. So you have some resource and you want to edit just a part of this resource model. Other custom use case was web forms. We'll have a look at it later, and multiple editor support. So the customer wanted to have several editors which are able to interact with each other. So we started off with Orion. We started off with Orion because it provides the biggest coverage of all features, but then we found out that it supports only Internet Explorer 11, and it obviously doesn't cover our requirements. So we tried to switch to 8th, and as Mira mentioned, the Xtext integration doesn't provide, for example, show hour functionality. So basically, we ended up with a dilemma whether we support fewer features or browsers, and then we actually have a look what we've done to switch from Orion to 8th, and basically we just change language generation workflow. We just switch it, like I want to use 8th, not Orion. We regenerate and we get an editor. So in reality, Mira built nice abstractions over these editors, and if you work against it, you can combine editors and serve different users, different editors to cover more features and browsers. Okay, custom use cases, as I mentioned, it's partition editors. It's not much to talk about, and then web forms. So web forms, there was like first, it's the same in Eclipse where sometimes there are users who don't want to code. They want to have to use forms to edit the models. So we have to provide them with that forms. Other like you want to provide different views or widgets which show you additional information to your code, like documentation, rich documentation. And then actually for the same user who don't want to code, they also want to use templates, and they should be backed up by forms. So you use input fields to provide placeholders in the form and create it. So again, an API which mirror build suit very well. So we just implement new language services on the server side, connected them to the client side, and it worked nicely. So we provided model transformation services because we need to transform resources to partition editors models or to web forms, and then we should do backward transformation. We back up the form with EMF diagnostic in Xtext completions. So we basically ask for diagnostic, and then we show them in the form input, or when you have drop-down list with completions that they can select it. And yes, if you create a template, you should apply it. It was another service. So here, really interesting topics come when you don't want to have just one editor widget. You want to, like it's a typical case which Xtext Web API was used to, what was designed to be used. When you have like two editors, but they have isolated resource set with primary resource, and then they can load some additional resources for cross-reference resolution, but they isolated. You don't have any problems. In our case, we had single resource set with interconnected models with cyclic references. And then, like, you should customize a lot. First, you should think about resource access, because in MRF you even cannot read the model, because reading one resource can resolve cross-reference and change semantic model in another resource. So you should make sure that you have single semaphore for all write requests, even for read also. And so we did it, and then we discovered that, so we have this write and read request, and if a read request comes and then another write request comes, we will cancel them because they're unmeaningful. Like, you should change it, and then you should try to create validations again. So you have 3 write requests, the 4th comes, it cancels this one. But on the server side, we don't do update of other affected resources. So the client should trigger update for affected resources. And first 2 requests, they should not be canceled. They should be executed because they contain this information, with incremental changes. What happened in reality is they were canceled, because the cancellation policy by default is bound to the semaphore. And so we have to solve also this issue. And I hope you understand that it's not really easy issues. They involve quite a lot of debugging and thinking and changing. And the last issue was with triggering updates for affected resources. So basically, we have to hook up in editor lifecycle. And when update comes, we also will trigger updates for other editors according to references. But we don't know them, so we kind of repeat this information on the editor side. And if you change reference semantic, you also should update with dependencies on the client side and make things complicated. And that leads to cases like infinity loop of updates. So we have to distinguish updates. We introduce so-called force update. So the first user update, it can cause update of affected resources. With force update, it doesn't cause any side effects. So when you want to have multiple editors, you should solve a lot of problems, like how you synchronize with access management, how you cancel requests, and how you do with incremental builds. Yeah, OK. So some recap just. So Web API has nice abstraction that it hides concrete editors, and if you work against it, you have very stable code. It's very extensible to provide custom use cases, but implementing multiple editor support is hard. And just remember it, we will talk about it a bit later again.
Yeah, now to something new. We have heard yesterday from the keynote about VS Code presented by Microsoft. And so what is very interesting for us on that editor is what was also mentioned by Dirk yesterday, that VS Code runs on web technologies, so it uses HTML5 and CSS for rendering, and has everything is implemented in TypeScript. And some the most important components here for us, or most interesting, are the language server protocol, which was also covered in its own session yesterday, and has been referenced a lot, and also in other talks on this conference, and the Monaco editor, which was also described by Dirk, so which is the editor widget inside that application. We have been first just very quickly about this language server protocol. The idea is to plug together IDEs and editors on one side, and support for as many languages as possible on the other side. So in order to reuse the efforts that have been made to implement services like content assist, validation, and all this other stuff that have been maybe done once for one IDE, or maybe on a platform-independent way. And so to reuse these efforts, make them available also to other editors. So of course the way is to define a common protocol so these components can communicate with each other. So first, let's have a quick look at the differences to what we have seen before with our Web API protocol. There are still request and response-based messaging. So if the user hits control space, there's again a completion request. The server processes that. The result is a list of proposals. It's a little bit different this time for validation. Here it's the server who is initiating the diagnostics presentation, or the notification that there are diagnostics to the client. So the server this time is the one who decides when to do the validation and when to send the message to the client about the results. So this is no longer possible, of course, using this the servlet-based implementation that we had. So here we need a permanent connection. So you could do this, for example, with a WebSocket. For VS Code, that's just done using a separate process and using just standard I/O communication between the processes, or you could use any inter-process communication channel. In Xtext, we have followed this new approach, I think starting from April or May this year. And in the beginning, after we have released the first version of the Xtext Web API, we thought with time we will add some more features and make it richer, and even improve the multiple editor support that Anton has been talking about, that is a little bit difficult to realize currently, because we don't have a builder infrastructure set up on the server side by default. So you have to take care yourself how to handle that. But now our view, I think, is a little bit different, because this language server protocol already provides us with a way that is actually supporting a workspace instead of just one single document. So we have implemented a language server for Xtext, and here I have the Monaco symbol on this, or the Visual Studio symbol on this last column. So Monaco is one web-based editor widget that can be used, that supports this protocol, and that can be used to attach to our implementation of the language server. And this gives us a much richer set of features if we use this kind of protocol with this editor, compared to what we have with our previous Web API. So as I already said, of course, it would be possible to add a lot of these features also using the other API. And especially for Orion, we have heard also yesterday from the talk from IBM that there are efforts to support the protocol there too. So we can expect the Orion editor widget to be also an alternative to Monaco, to have a similar set of features somewhere in the future. But so currently now our focus is actually a bit more on this side, and so we have to see how far we get on using that track. So I will show you how that looks like for the same language that I have demonstrated before. So this is also available online on this monacodemo.typeforks.io page. And here I have a slightly larger example, but it's the same language. So I get content assist in a similar way as before, and I have things like, of course, I have validation. I have things like highlighting of cross-references or of occurrences of a certain variable or so. One cool thing here is that the evaluation of the expressions can be done inline in this example. So I just hit Shift and Enter, and I get the result. I can clear the results with Control X. And one thing, for example, that is not currently possible with the other editor integrations that I showed before is that I can follow the such references, for example, to this variable R by clicking Command and click in the same way as it's done in Eclipse, and the cursor jumps to the definition of that variable. So this is one of the features that were not possible before. So Anton.
Yeah, so I want to talk more about features of Xtext language server, not from perspective of LS API, but how it solves problems which I mentioned before. So Xtext language server is a wrapper around incremental builder. So it takes care about updating affected resources, computing them. You don't need to do it on the client side anymore. Like, it's really abstracted over it. Then it takes care about also read and write requests and how they should be canceled. So as a language implementer, you actually will be focused on workspace modeling. So there is an API to define what is project and what kind of dependency between them. And yeah, what do you usually do? You just implement languages, and you can have multiple languages. And so using Xtext language server and Monaco, we built a product which you've probably already seen several times during the conference. Yes, and I want to present you it again, but please look at it from different perspective, how editors interact between each other. So it's a write, it's a data science IDE, it supports R language. And for example, you see here you see your files which you have in your workspace, and you can open them, and you get this Monaco editor, and obviously you have all these features like content assist, for example, for plot stream example, function. But let's add another editor. So, for example, for JavaScript development, we have these consoles, like to debug JavaScript. And for write, we also have such console with running R session, so we can execute some R code and see it. So I will source an example file here. So source, and then I get nice content assist, for example, R, and I can source it here. So it's done. And then I get a proposal for features for functions from this file. So I have this plot stream example, and it gets executed. What nice is about it also is that with prompt in the console, it's another Monaco editor. So here, I actually have a cross-reference, and I can navigate to declaration using it, like here. And let's try to break declaration, and you will see that you get an error here. So I just rename it, make it bogus, and you get a warning, so like there is an unknown symbol, and you can fix it. Yeah. Also, you can use find reference to navigate to other editors. So, for example, we have this Y variable, and we can see where is it used. Like there is a dataset R file which have a declaration for this variable. We can go there. Yeah. So, I want to have this feeling that it's getting easy to have this multi-editor supports, as it was before. And so 1 year ago, we had this editor widgets. You can just kind of embed and use them isolated. Now you can have embedded editor widget, which is workspace aware, so they can communicate, and it's getting easy. And we say that we support Monaco, but in reality, you can support it, provide support for other editors also. So there are issues and bugzillas to provide integration with a language server API. So if you get it, you can use editor of your choice, not only Monaco. Our future plan, so we want to get rid of these parentheses, which we had on the slide with Monaco, that it means that feature is not implemented, but we work on it. So our goal is feature complete Xtext language server. And also regarding Web API, we want to make use of a language server for Web API that it's also getting easy to use multiple editors for that. So that's all. Thank you for your attention and questions. And don't forget to vote after our talk.
Yeah, we have a few minutes for questions. Yeah.
Is the code of the demos which you showed available somewhere like the GitHub or something?
Yet at this moment now, it's not public, but yeah, we are currently thinking about where we will put it and so on. So it's quite probable that we will have some place where you can see how the demos are realized. But of course, what you can do already is if you have the client, so the web page, you can look at the JavaScript code, for example. Well, but we are using minified versions. Maybe that's not so nice to look at.
Yeah, that we will publish them somewhere. Yes. Other?
How well does the language server work with text-based languages already out of the box?
Yeah, well, the language server is independent of what kind of language it is. So I think the main work that is still has to be done there is actually on our in Xtext, so to support Xbase better on this generic level. So for Xbase, we currently have an excellent support for Eclipse with all kinds of integrations there. We have a basic support for it for Xbase on the generic level, which can also be used by the Xtext Web API. And that same, so one nice thing is that both the Xtext Web API, so the first approach that I showed, and the language server implementation of Xtext, they use the same base implementations, which are platform independent. And for Xbase, there is some initial code for that, but there is still a room for improvement. For example, hovers, I think, are not specialized yet.
Okay.
About the Monaco implementation, I didn't quite catch, is it production ready or is it concept or which stage it is, because on the web page I get of the Xtext, it's not listed as a supported editor.
It's currently under development still. So the Xtext language server will be part of the 2.11 release that is scheduled for end of January. And as soon as we have released that, I think you can start using it, for example, with Monaco and other clients supporting the protocol. And yeah, I think in that process of this release, we will also update documentations and pointers to existing clients. No question left? Okay, then thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.